Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining me today. This is going to be a quick preparation video for people who want to do an interview with me. Some of you have reached out where you've maybe already got an interview scheduled with me or you're preparing for one and we're going to schedule it soon, but you just want some more background as to what I do in my interviews kind of behind the scenes. So I wanted to kind of pull the curtain back and give you some of the stuff that I would tell interviewees and also to hopefully prepare you for the interview in a way that is a little bit better than just coming into it cold turkey. So I'm going to go through the full context. I am sure, like anything, any topic we could pick up, as soon as I'm done recording this and posting it, I'm going to think of something I left out. But, if there's enough that I leave out, I'll do another one of these in a few months. But for now, I'm just going to go with the notes I've got. In terms of scheduling, I try to schedule interviews at least a month out from whenever I first connect with someone. The reason for that is, of course, usually I'm backed up at least a month with other interviews scheduled, but also I like to give people time to think about it and to really prepare for it. If we have to push it out further, I'll schedule up to maybe 2 months out. If it's like 3 to 4 months away, when we're saying, if it's a January and we're saying let's do it in April or May, I'll just hold off on scheduling. I'll put you on my calendar as someone to reach out to and connect with, but we won't actually schedule it yet just because there's too many things that could change in that big length of time. The interview length, typically my interviewees and I chat for about 10 minutes before we start recording. I'm hopeful that this video can cut that down maybe to 5 minutes, but some people just want to chat for a little bit and kind of talk privately. That's fine. Then we can just jump right in if people feel ready. I would advise you to block off at least 3 hours. Number one, of course, if we're doing a 2 hour interview, when we take a few minutes beforehand, you're already looking at two and 15, 2.5 for that time slot. So block off at least 3 hours. If you don't have that much time, we can shrink it down. I've done some interviews that are about an hour and 15, an hour and a half. I don't like to go much shorter than that, but if that's all you have, we'll work with it. But if it's an issue of, well, I've only got an hour and a half today, but I've got 3 hours in, 2 weeks, we can just reschedule and so forth. But try to look for a time when we can block off at least 3 hours. I don't do live interviews for a couple of reasons. But the good thing is that you can step out of character whenever you need to. If you want to restate something that you misspoke on, like let's say you say in the interview where we're actually recording, you say, my pastor was such a jerk. And as soon as you say it, you think that's true, but it's not the way I want to say it. I wish I'd said something more like, my pastor said and did some very toxic things. Well, just say, Tim, scratch that part out. And then what you need to do is take a breath, take a second, and then start over from the beginning of the sentence. Don't put it in the middle. Start from the very beginning of what you said, and I will just splice out anything you told me to scratch out. If you need to restate things in a better way, if you say, no, that was a okay way to say it, but I've got a better way now that I think about it, we can totally redo that as much as you want. This is about making you feel like you're well represented, that you're shining in this interview, and that, this is the kind of thing you can look back on with pride, that you said the things you said and so forth. If there's anything I ask you about, you can certainly say, I don't want to address that question in the interview. If you think about it later and say, let's just take it out. If I ask you, for example, do you really believe in the virgin birth and the resurrection? And someone is going to say, oh, no, of course not. But they think it could affect their job. Then totally just say, you know what, when I said in the interview, no, or if I said in the interview, let's pass on that question, just take the whole thing out. I don't even want to have it part of the recording. That's fine. That's totally fine. We'll do whatever we need to do to protect your job and so forth. I've even blurred people out before. If you need to be blurred out and we do it, where it's just your voice, there's options like that. In terms of, again, going back to it being recorded but not live, if you need to clear your throat, if your dog barks, you need to go use the restroom, we can step out of character as much as you want. You'll see me do it, a dozen times in the interview. Anything at all that you need to step out of character for. If you need to look something up, if you're like, oh, who is that Christian apologist so-and-so? Just say, hey, hold on a second, let's scratch this. Go look up what you want to look up, and then we'll start over again, and you can just pick it up with what you were thinking of. I do use Zoom for my recordings, and I'll send you a Zoom link just a few minutes before we start, 5 or 10 minutes before the start time. And I would encourage you to use a laptop or a desktop computer if possible, not a cell phone. If you use a cell phone or a tablet, Zoom will sometimes crop your video to a square instead of a 16:9 rectangle, the portrait mode. it means your video is smaller and I have to put some kind of filler in between. So like mine is going to be the regular 16:9. Yours is going to be a much smaller version next to me. But because I want it to be even 16:9, 16:9, I've got to add some filler on the side of yours. I can do that. I have done that before. I prefer that we look the same in terms of our sizing. So a laptop or a desktop with a regular camera is highly preferred. If you have to use a cell phone or a tablet, of course, it has to be on some kind of do not disturb, and where you're not getting pinged, you're not getting alerts, you're not seeing things pop up on the screen. You have to be able to concentrate and focus on the interview. So I've had a lot of cases where people have to keep on clicking where they're suddenly like, oh, I can't see you anymore. Something popped up. And so they have to stop the interview and, swipe it off. Again, it's an option. It's not the best. And this is definitely about you. Number one, it's about you shining, you being able to tell your story with the least distractions, the fewest distractions. It's also about not making it crazy difficult for me to edit the whole interview. Your face, and being identifiable. If you don't want to use your real name or have your face blurred in the video, again, I can work with you on that. We can use if you have a YouTube handle, we can use that. If you just want to go by your first name, but not last name, and go by your middle name, if you want to go by, no name, that's fine. Just let me know your concerns and your situation. I'll do my best to accommodate you. And in that vein, if there's ever a situation where we do an interview and it looks like there's going to be some kind of trouble for you, certainly we can make the video private or just delete it, later. But whatever you need to do to protect yourself and your job, please keep that in mind. In terms of the physical background and the context, I would ask that it be at your home, not at someone else's home where you have no control over the lighting and the noises. At your home, not in your car, and not at the park or anywhere outside, not even in your backyard. There's going to be chirping birds, there's going to be wind, cars going by. You might need sunglasses. People have allergies, anything like that, where something could move around you and change the noise level, make it a distraction and an annoyance for the viewers. Anything at all like that, we don't want that in the video. If you're inside, but you have animals that could make noise, dogs sometimes have, of course, the long nails. If you have a wooden floor, and you don't have too many carpets around, the dog's nails hitting the wood as it's walking around the floor is going to make an unbelievable distraction. If you have cats, they're going to jump up on the table behind you, mess with you while you're doing that because they want affection. Obviously it's cute stuff, but not for the video. Please put them in a separate spot and make it so they can't come and annoy you during the video. You need to be inside, again, with the brightest light facing you. So for example, if you have a big bay window, you can't have it where your back is to the window. Your face has to be toward it. Otherwise you'll be very, very shaded instead of being well lit. You obviously want to check that it's not too well lit. You don't want to be so bright that you look like, just you're pure white, and that there's no real details that can come out from the video. It needs to be a decent video of you. So I would recommend that you try it, try it with Zoom or some other video program, make it look as good as you can. Some computers will have software that you can they'll have on the computer, you can download it from the manufacturer, that allows you to also edit your video settings. So for example, I use a camera from Logitech, and when I connect it up, it's connecting through Zoom, but I also have a separate app that I can open that would directly address just my Logitech camera and would allow me to do things like change the color intensity, the white balance, the brightness, the contrast, the focus. So things like that can help a lot. You might want to also take a look at things like your light changing. So for example, if we're in a spot where, I'm just going to pick an example. Let's say we choose to start at 4:00 in the afternoon and you're very well lit and you look pretty normal, but we're at a time of year where maybe by 6 p.m. as we're wrapping up, the light is almost gone. You're very, very dark. At that point, the wonderful sunlight has become a liability because you now look distorted. You've gone from a well-lit person to a person sitting in the shadows. At that point, it probably would have been worth it to simply keep you in artificial light the whole time and to try to adjust it so it's as clear as possible. That way you're not dealing with this issue of the sun, changing how dark you are. See here. So again, the inside with the brightest light facing you, but not blinding you, not turning you ashen white and so forth. No fluorescent lights. They have a flicker that's sometimes perceptible by your camera. It'll make little lines that'll go down the video. Can mess it up. So Please use regular light bulbs if possible. Again, reading through this list here, no TV on, of course. If you have a TV on, even if for the kids, if there's TV noise, radio noise, any noise in the background, we don't want to do it that way. Of course, no children around. If you're in a spot where it's not like a nice background, where it's just a beautiful sofa or some nice area where it just looks pretty to look at. If it's like a lived-in area, like it's your bedroom or your bathroom, if it's your bedroom or your kitchen, it has to be clean. So if it's in your bedroom, your closets have to be shut. If we can see your floor, no clothes on the floor. If we can see your bed should be made. If it's a kitchen, there shouldn't be dirty dishes in the background. Make this look professional. Pretend you're doing something for, a newscast. You wouldn't want a whole bunch of dirty things in the background showing that your home environment is messy, even if that's what you normally have. Or if you don't have it, either way, just please for this clean up. And I hope that a lot of you can do this in a spot where it's separate from those lived-in environments where it's more like a living room area. But if we can't, just keep it as professional as you can. Again, no open closets, spotless bedrooms if we're going there. If you're going to be interrupted and you can anticipate it, like let's say you have kids in the other room and you've put them in front of a TV, but there's no one else, there's no babysitter or anyone else in the family that's watching them, it's just them in front of the TV. That in an hour their Netflix program is going to end. They're going to come in and say, can we please watch another movie? Anything like that, we need to think through that. I don't want interruptions through it. What I would say is, though, if it's going to be like 1 or 2 interruptions max, we can work with that. If it's going to be like 5 or 6 interruptions, at that point, let's just postpone it until you've got someone that can help keep you from being interrupted. Pets, again, no dogs or other animals, especially on a wood floor where their nails are going to be heard. No birds or chirping noises. If you have like pet birds, pet parakeets, they can't be chirping in the background. We don't want anything like that. People will tune out if they hear that kind of stuff. Any loud fans, of course, super loud fans. If it's a low fan or just your computer fan, I can edit that out. I do edit the audio, take out background noises. But if it's an obnoxious noise, and I can't take it out, people will disconnect from the video. Windows, try to avoid being too close to any windows where there's going to be noises, such as if you have a huge air conditioning unit right outside the window and you're right there, it's going to flip on and off the whole time. Again, birds chirping, car noises. If you're right near a highway, figure out some way so that those noises are going to be mitigated. You have to have good internet. That includes being mindful of others in the house that might take up excessive bandwidth. If you have 5 kids and they're all watching on the tablet in high definition and somebody's gaming, and then you're trying to do this, you're going to have less internet bandwidth. So try to have them download their shows in advance and watch it through the download section of the tablet so they're not taking up your live video bandwidth during the interview. Glasses, if you can, try to avoid them because they're obviously going to have glare that's going to make it difficult for us to see your eyes. I would prefer that you don't wear glasses. If you can, either wear contacts if you have them, or try to just take them off and you do it without. Make sure your lights are angled in a way that there's, if you're going to have glasses, if it's like there's no way to not wear glasses, do some tests so that the lights are angled in a way that the glare is minimized. We want to see your whole face. We don't want to see your face, but then your glasses are just this glary light. Your camera should be at a decent resolution, of course. It needs to be landscape mode, not portrait mode. So that's why with a cell phone, being up and down, it's not going to work as well because you're going to get cut off. You want it to be landscape mode, and it needs to be centered horizontally and vertically. I've had people that have started correctly and then moved, so you need to be self-conscious enough to not mess this up. But if you start this way and by the middle of the interview you're drifting over here, or you're drifting down, you need to be conscious of that, and you need to start about where I'm at. If you can kind of see, my head's a little bit above the center line horizontally, and it's fairly centered, vertically. We need to have that kind of dynamic going on. It needs to be parallel to your face. It can't be angled up. Some people will you do a cell phone or a tablet on the table, but it's lower than them, so it's looking up at their nose. We're not looking to have any interviews where we're looking up your nose. It's just people get turned off by that angle. They don't see your face as much. There's shadows that get introduced that don't need to be there. So make sure it's parallel or close to it to your face. It has to be a fixed camera. It can't be propped up against a wall or a box. If it's something where for the first 30 minutes, it's going to be at a one angle, and then you're going to have to, pick up the phone to stop doing notifications, and you're going to put it back. But when you put it back, it's going to be slightly different. It's going to look different. And I prefer the uniformity of it all if possible. It has to be a fixed spot, on a tripod or somewhere where it's not going to move. We're not going to see it 2 or 3 different angles throughout the interview. For your headphones and your microphone, you need to have some kind of earbuds or headphones. I prefer earbuds. I've got the wired ones, but some people use the Bluetooth. Something where it's the audio that's coming out of your computer is not coming out into the open air. Otherwise, your microphone is going to pick it up and it will cycle through. If my audio is coming out of your speakers into the room, that feedback loop is going to mess it up. We don't want that. The audio that you hear from me has to go into your ears only. I've had some people whose microphones go in and out sporadically, where I'm hearing them and suddenly I can't hear them. I think it's because they're looking. Some people have cameras that have some kind of functionality. I don't have it myself, but it tries to sense where you are, and it tries to only capture you when you're right in front of the camera. So if you're moving to the side a little bit, you suddenly just drop, like your audio just drops. It's cool technology that they can do that. I'm sure there's cases where that's really helpful, but for interviews, of course, that's very unhelpful. So if you have any kind of microphone that has that feature, if you can turn it off, of course, turn it off and just use it regularly so that as you move, your microphone picks you up just as usual. If you don't have that option to turn it off, please consider getting some kind of other mic. Now, there's a lot of different kinds of mics. Of course, you can use the ones that are just on your headphones, but they have the little piece here. One of the things I would say be mindful of is a lot of times people have that, and this particular one I've got on doesn't have those, but I've got others that do. But it'll end up moving against your shirt as you move, or people have long hair and it bangs it, or bangles and necklaces and things that are jiggling against it, and all of a sudden that microphone that's otherwise decent quality, it just keeps on picking up background noise. You have to be mindful of that. Some of it could be as simple as pulling your hair back, taking off the necklaces, but I've seen other cases where it's just as simple as it's just moving back and forth against the shirt like that. And it annoys, the crap out of you to hear it. So try to be mindful of things like that. We don't want that if possible. We want a clear sound. Again, I do put the audio, I'll put your audio and my audio separately through a program that will try to clean it up a little bit. If the audio is horrible, it's really hard to do something good with that. But if it's decent, I can usually clean up a little bit of the background noise, try to play with the bass and the treble a little bit and just make it sound a little bit more studio quality. But there's always going to be some way in which that's not going to be perfect. We just don't, we don't, it doesn't matter if it's not perfect, but I want it to be decent, really, really try your best. So do some tests, call someone else through Zoom or whatever. When you are actually in the interview, you have your microphone. If it's one that's separate from you, it's not like on your neck. If it's separate from you, you should be about 6 to 12 inches away from the microphone. If you're too far away, of course, it won't pick you up. If you're too close to it, it will end up having distortions to it. And sometimes it can have like a little hum from you're interrupting a magnetic field, and you just introduce this little, again, I can edit a little bit of that out, but if it's consistent and it's obnoxious, it may be difficult to edit it all out. Just work on that. And for those of you that are thinking of doing one interview with me, but you're going to be doing more over time with other people, these are great things to just be testing and, knock this stuff out of the park anyway, just for your other interviews. So again, please do a test run with someone else, 1 or 2 test runs with somebody for 5 or 10 minutes. In the actual interview, this is your time. This is your time to share your story. This is your time to take your time. Go down memory lane here or there. Tell us what it was like. What I like to tell people is, please feel free to literally go through step by step by step your story from what you believe from the earliest days. So what you were taught by your parents, your pastor, your teachers, your siblings. What did people tell you about all this religious belief stuff? What did you learn from the Bible stories and the Sunday school lessons, the TV shows you watched, the radio programs, anything that affected and shaped your worldview? Tell us about it. What were the influences that were coming into your worldview bubble? And totally take your time with that, especially as you get to the point where you talk about if you had a conversion story where you say, I understood at one point from the preacher, the youth pastor, whoever, somebody showed me I was a sinner in desperate need of a savior. I was on my way to condemnation eternally if I did not have some kind of rescue, and Jesus rescued me. And this is what he did. This is what the cross and the death and resurrection meant. This is what the blood meant. All that stuff about the atonement. If you had a time, a day or a season where you said, I repent of my sins, I acknowledge I'm a sinner, I acknowledge I deserve punishment, I acknowledge Christ took my punishment for me, I humbly, gratefully accept his provision as my substitute. If that faith journey was part of what you went through, please do share it. Share it exactly as it happened. Share what you actually did to place your faith in Christ and what the result was. Did you suddenly have peace? Did you have a sense of you were definitely going to heaven? All that kind of stuff. Whatever that journey was that really kicked off your walk with Christ, please share it. Of course, in the big picture of the interview, stay focused on the big picture of your life. Don't bring up details that are entirely irrelevant. I've had people do this before. Some of it I can edit out, but I try not to edit out too much of what people share. But if you're telling a story and you decide to go into details about, what the apartment was like and how many people lived there and what your car was like, again, some of those details, if they come in, they're important to the story, bring them up. But if it's not important to the story, please keep moving. Give a big picture. We lived in this house in this state and what happened there. But we don't need to know details about how big or small it was, what color it was, how many cars you had. Those details that are entirely irrelevant, you have to move past them. You have to get to a point where you can keep the story moving. If you're boring, people will check out. They just will. I like to encourage people to think of it like you're sitting in a circle with a large group of people, and everyone gets to introduce themselves and tell their story, kind of like the AA concept. But instead of it being, I assume they have 5 or 10 minutes apiece. Instead, you have 2 hours. This is your time. The ball's passed to you. You have 2 hours to share your story of what's been going on in your world. Tell your story as slowly as you want to. Give the details. This is your chance. This is not, I'm going to try to only jump in. I don't want to be interrupting all the time. I'm going to jump in with some questions, but this is your story. This is your chance. Be aware of boredom issues like I talked about. We're not trying to just tell every last detail, but definitely take the time you need to share the highlights. And of course, as you're preparing, write them down with bullet points. We'll go through some of that in a few minutes. In terms of your actual speaking, of course, just be aware of your tendencies. We all have issues with smacking our lips, so try not to drink anything sugary right before your interview. For me, drinking milk products or something sugary would affect me negatively. Be aware of repeated phrases. Again, I have this issue too, so I'm preaching to myself here. But we all say things like, everyone has. We all say things like, and as we look at those repeated phrases, if you can try to pull yourself back a little bit, be yourself. If you're constantly thinking to yourself, I can't say that one phrase over and over and over, you're not going to feel free to just be yourself. So don't overdo that thought process, but just be a little bit aware of it. If you repeat the same thing, especially if you have one phrase, it's just your pet phrase, and you say it over and over and over, just try. If you can't, you can't. And for some of us, they're habits that are in our heads, so it's hard to let go of them. Do your best. I do recommend that you practice the interview at least a little bit, especially if this is your first interview ever. Just go through it, in front of a mirror with a friend. Do it on Zoom, at least in your head. Do something where you kind of give some kind of practice to it. If you don't practice at all, what's likely to happen is that you will get through the interview and it will be kind of choppy. You won't feel as eloquent as you could have felt. And you'll look back at it and you'll say, I did a good job. This was my story. I wasn't as eloquent as I could have been. I could have said things better, and I wish I had. And you'll kind of think of the interview as if it was a practice interview, even though it wasn't. It was your actual interview. So if you can get some of the practice out of the way first, hear yourself, record it, even if it's audio only, record your own interview. Even if it's just audio, get your cell phone out, open up an audio app, just take a walk around the park, tell your story, and then go back and listen to yourself. Say, how did I sound? What was good? What was bad? Try to make sure you don't forget to talk about anyone who was really important in your life. So don't just say, and then I got married. Well, who is this? Where did you meet? Where did you meet? How did you meet? What was your courtship like? Were you in alignment on worldview issues? If you summarize important things like, and then I got married, but you don't tell us how that whole story happened, number one, it's from the person you're married to's perspective, like you summarize like 4 years of our courtship and marriage and early life together with one sentence, and then I got married. It doesn't, of course, respect them as much as as they deserve for their major impact on your life. But also, we're obviously going to have parts of that story that are going to impact your eventual outcome. Because if you're married, for example, and you deconverted, and your spouse is a ultra conservative fundamentalist, there's going to be some conflicts, and we're going to want to hear about how that evolved. Certainly, your parents, your pastors, anything like that. Just talk about the important people in your life. When you get to those junctures, tell us who you're talking about, even if you can't say their name, whatever, for privacy. Just describe who you're talking about. Give us enough to work with. Try to put yourself in your listener's shoes. Are you overcomplicating your story? Are there too many characters in specific stories? If you're talking about, if you go down memory lane and you talk about a story, and there's like 6 different people in this story, and people are like, who's he talking about now? What's she saying? If it's really complicated, it's not worth doing that. So either don't tell that story, or tell it but simplify it a lot more. There's ways you can do that, but anything like that, if you're going to say my dad's friend and his uncle and his uncle's cousin and their neighbor, then they did this, they did that. Who is are you talking about the dad first, the uncle first, the uncle's cousin, the neighbor? Like, who are we talking about? That stuff we want to avoid, of course. Breaks, if take breaks as often as you need to. If you need to use the restroom frequently, or you have some other concern, please don't worry about it. We can take breaks whenever you want to. Just step out of character as needed. We'll jump back in a few minutes later. I'll just edit it out as if it never happened. Of course, same thing if your internet stops. That's obviously one of the more frustrating aspects of this. If your internet stops, we'll give it a few minutes, try to resolve it, or my internet stops. If at some point it's like, all right, we've been working on this for 20 minutes and the internet is either not coming back on or it's choppy, let's just call it. Unfortunately, we'll call it a practice run, and we'll reschedule it, and we'll do it another time. Going on to pauses and interruptions again. It's not live. You need to pause, take care of an interruption, rephrase something you said, step out of character, whatever you want. I will edit out anything that's not in character for the interview. If you need to look something up, if you need to take a few seconds to think of a good answer, if I put you on the spot with a question, if you're like, that's a really good question, I didn't think you were going to ask that, or I didn't expect that, I want to answer your question, but how do I even start? Just totally say, you know what, give me a minute. Make it clear. I wave my hands for myself for the editing process later. Give yourself a minute to make it a little bit clearer to yourself as to how you want to handle that question. If you start to answer a question that feels complicated, and you've said 2 or 3 sentences, and you're like, you know what, that's still not the right way to answer that question. Totally fine. You're not under any pressure with these interviews. Totally say, you know what, I want more time to think about it. That's fine. I do ask that you have some kind of prepared notes, usually like bullet points, say at least 10 to 20 things that you want to talk about, different topics, different parts of your journey. A lot of people say, can you tell me in advance, Tim, what you're going to ask? What are the questions you're going to ask? And that's hard for me to answer because I base my questions on what you provide. So if, for example, someone's going to bring up the topic of baptism, and, or either infant baptism or adult baptism, and that's a big part of their scenario, we might go down that with several questions. You're talking about circumcision, talking about the Lord's table, talking about purity culture. If your story involved a lot of work about missions or ministry of some kind, I'll curtail my questions to your particular story, so I can't just give my questions in advance. Having said that, if you watch 3 or 4 of my traditional interviews, you're probably going to get a sense of what I do. But what's going to help the most is if you have prepared bullets of what you want to go through. And so you make sure that by the time we're done, you've gotten through them. You can also pace yourself. Say, all right, I've got 20 bullets here that I want it. If I don't get through all 20, I didn't tell my story fully yet. So pace yourself and say, all right, around if this interview is 2 hours, around 60 minutes, I should be at least halfway through my bullet points. If you're not, we can speed it up and so forth and take it from there. Again, the interview isn't live, so any questions you don't feel comfortable with, we can skip them. If you don't want to answer them, I can edit anything out like that. With your Christian background, again, be sure to cover your actual conversion story. Define the gospel clearly. Define the gospel if that makes sense to you. What you believed, what was your path to resolving the sin issue, giving you peace with God. Talk about your baptism if applicable. Talk about your prayer life, your devotions, memorization, Bible studies, your time in church, ministries you got involved with. Go over what you believed, why you believed it. Share the ways that you work to strengthen your love for God, your knowledge of the Bible, your efforts to share the gospel with people, to save the lost, to increase your prayer life, to surrender to God, to increase in personal holiness, just all that stuff. What it meant for you to be a Christian and to grow in your love and knowledge of God and your service for Him. Please do that. And I would really encourage you to think of this as there will be Christians watching who will be judging and trying to figure out were you really a Christian or not. And of course, some of them will always say, if you're doing a deconversion story, you were never a Christian. Granted, there's going to be people like that and jerks that just kind of undermine anything with it I do. But there's going to be some honest Christians who are going to say, I wonder if this person really did love the Lord. They really were a Christian. If you are going to tell your story and there's not a few big things that come up, it may not even be a good fit for us to do an interview. But if you're a Christian, then you're obviously going to care about the Bible, His love letter to us. You're going to care about learning it, reading it, memorizing it. It's the holy word of God, from a Christian perspective. If you don't have any sense of wanting to surrender to God and to His will, to say, God, you're the king, I will not usurp your place, you're the judge. To say, God, I want to fall in love with you more every day. I want to be holy. I want to be pure. I want to be a vessel that you can use. If there was no sense of you hearing pastors preaching and you got convicted of sin, if you never felt like either literally or figuratively crying over the depravity of how much you've offended God because you are truly wicked inside and your sin has cost Him so much, if you don't have any sense of that background, Christians are going to look at you and say, I don't think you're a Christian. If you can go for years without conviction, years without reading your Bible, years of sleeping around, years of doing all kinds of things that offended God, the God of the Bible, and that offended your church and its leadership, and you just didn't care. It was like, but I still was a Christian. Christians will look at you and say, you weren't a Christian. True Christians have the Spirit, and the Spirit does not leave people to themselves and their own selfish devices. The Spirit comes in and transforms. If you're just playing with sin all the time, like you didn't even care about it, you're not transformed. And I would have said the same thing as a Christian. You probably weren't truly believing it. People who really believe this stuff truly want to be a clean vessel for the Lord. Their goal is the gospel. Their goal is the gospel to be lived out. You understand the depth of your depravity, your sin, the gloriousness of the provision Christ has made, and of your need now to, out of gratitude, live your life for God and also to share this glorious gospel with other people who are lost and headed to eternity. If you don't resonate with that, if that's like, no, I had no real convictions, I didn't feel sad about sin, I didn't feel too concerned about the lost. Again, it's not like I'm personally offended by it. The Bible doesn't matter to me at all. But in terms of what I do, we're probably not a good fit for an interview, because if Christians can say it's clear you didn't really care about the things of the Lord, then your deconversion didn't mean too much, right? So I hope that makes sense. Please be honest with yourself about where you're at with that. I've had people do interviews, and I've thought to myself, I don't know when I was a Christian if I would have called you a Christian, because you didn't seem to really care too much. It was very cultural for you. I'm not looking to interview people where they were cultural Christians. I'm sure there's channels where that wouldn't be a big deal. Cultural Christianity is not my niche. I'm looking for people who wanted to turn the world upside down for Christ. I'm looking for people who said the Bible is the word of God. It's inerrant, and I love it. I want the Bible in my brain, in my heart, in my body. I want this running through me every minute of the day. If it's not, I can't wait to get home and watch football or some other show. I can't wait to get home and get in the Word of God. That's who I want to interview. So enough said about that. I'm going to assume that children could be watching from time to time, so the content and the verbiage can't be super offensive or concerning. In addition, of course, anything super offensive or concerning could count against YouTube monetization. But, so we're going to say nothing overly sexual. I can certainly edit it out if it goes over the top. If you want to talk about something separately that's very explicit, just, personally as friends, we can talk before or after the recording or separately. But I don't want, people talking in depth about sexuality in a way that children would be, that this will be something very inappropriate for children to hear. I don't want too much cursing, no cursing at all near the beginning. Mild cursing is fine later. If you're the kind of person that drops F-bombs all the time, dial it back for the channel, please. I can beep out some of the instances perhaps, but we're not looking to have that kind of dynamic. I do want to have the freedom to think for the most part that children and teenagers could listen to this and parents wouldn't be offended and say, no, we've got to shut it off for your ears. So just keep that in mind. In terms of us going back and forth, I'll let you do most of the talking, of course. I will jump in for questions and clarifications. Let's both try not to cut each other off. If we do, we can certainly just try to stop there, where if we're both, if I start talking and because you paused, but you start talking because you didn't hear my jumping in, and then you realize I'm jumping in, and so you kind of stop for a second, but then you see me stop, so you keep going, and then I see you stop for a second as well, and it's that back and forth. Let's just both admit that's happening for a second and stop and say, hold on, let's just start over. You take the floor. I'll hold my question until later. Anything that's going to be easier on the listener's ears, obviously. They don't want to hear us both cutting each other off as much as possible. Keep it moving, of course. The boredom issue. Do not just tell the same thing. And if you can say it in 2 minutes, say it in 2, not 15. If you can say it in 30 seconds, say it in 30 seconds. It's not that we don't want details. We do, especially if they're stories. Stories are going to be your golden part of this. Take us down memory lane, but keep it moving. If there's one particular spot of your story and you hit on it and you kind of stay there for 15 minutes, people are going to tune out. The ending wrap up at the end, I'll say, of course, thank you for coming. Thanks for sharing your story. You can say something, thanks for giving me the chance to do it or whatever. And then if I do it correctly, all I'm going to do is hit the end record button on Zoom. We'll still be on Zoom connected, so you don't have to disconnect. You don't have to hit the end conversation button on Zoom. It's a big red button. But we can take another 60 seconds, so to speak, offline after the video recording is done and talk about it. At that point, post-processing, I typically take between 2 and 4 weeks, occasionally a bit longer, to process it. If I feel convicted that it needs to go to the front of the line, I will, but most of the time I just go in the order that they were recorded. The video title is important. If you could, please be thinking before and after the interview of some titles, preferably at least 3 to 5 ideas. I may or may not go with your ideas. You will obviously not have to go with mine if you don't like them. If I come up with something you're like, that's a nice title, but that's not my story. That doesn't reflect what I went through. Let me know. You can look through my earlier videos for title ideas. It's going to need to be about 80 characters or less. Something punchy, powerful, but really reflective of your journey or where you've landed, something you've observed. The more that it's got a punch to it, obviously the better. But obviously nothing that's crazy. We're not looking to be ultra offensive here, but at the same time, something that's true for what you would say is where your heart is or what your journey's been. For the YouTube thumbnail, the actual little picture that I come up with the title and your picture, I do need thumbnail photos. I would prefer about 4 to 5 to choose from. And I want to stop and pause. This is one of the most difficult things I've had to deal with people not being able to fulfill this request. So I like to share it early. And I can't say it enough. People keep on giving me photos that are not what I'm about to describe. They're not the description I'm asking for. Is this good? Is this good? I'm like, but I already described what I was looking for. So please take this seriously. I'm looking for something that's straight on, not at an angle, straight on to you. It's, if you're turned a little bit to the camera, that's fine, but something that's straight on, not up your nose, and no hats, no sunglasses, etc. No glasses that have a glare. If you happen to have a picture where you have regular glasses on, but there's no glare, that's probably acceptable. At that point, if you're taking live pictures, just take some of both. Take some with your glasses on, some with your glasses off. No big words or large logos on your shirt. I don't want anything. If it says Nike the big slash. I don't want that kind of stuff. I want like a nice, like a LinkedIn photo. If you're doing LinkedIn, something like this, for the gentleman, anything like that, to just going to give a professional edge to it. I'd like it to be, again, nothing on your hat, no hats, no sunglasses. Don't take a picture with the light right behind you. The brightest lighted gun should be shining against your face so that you're clear. But take a couple examples. You don't want it where you're dark. You don't want it where you're too overexposed, but you want something that's going to just truly capture your skin tone, fairly close. I'll edit things a little bit, but it needs to be pretty close to your natural skin tone. Of course, it has to be clear. I have people all the time send me pictures that are truly blurry, and I don't understand that. Like, please don't send me a blurry picture. I wouldn't even consider a blurry picture. It has to be fairly decent resolution or clarity. If you can zoom in a little bit and it gets fuzzy right away, that's not the right picture. You should be able to zoom in at least a little bit and it stays clear. It needs to be something where it's from, easily above your head. So there's a little space above you, captures your whole face, your shoulders, all of your arms down to your waist, doesn't cut off your arms at all, nothing like that. I would prefer clothes that aren't too difficult to match with a background. So for example, if you've got a shirt that's got, all kinds of crazy floral patterns to it, it might be a beautiful shirt, but it's going to clash with an awful lot of backgrounds that I could choose. Choose something fairly simple, if possible. Little design on it is fine, but if it's really, really busy, that's probably not a good thumbnail photo. So you're thinking, again, a LinkedIn profile photo, that kind of level quality. A date night, if you're going out on a date, soon with your spouse, whatever, just take some pictures of each other and get a good picture. If you're something that's really flattering to you, sexy is fine. If it's a really sexy outfit, that's fine, but it can't be, again, something that's too casual. I don't want sloppy t-shirts. I've had people that wear it's just like a t-shirt that's it kind of looks out of shape and it looks like it's gone through the wash 500 times. We're looking for something that's date level picture, dating profile level picture, LinkedIn profile picture, something that's going to flatter you. Someone would look at that and say, that person is handsome, they're beautiful, they're professional. Edge of sexiness is fine, but nothing that's sloppy. That's what I'm trying to avoid as much as I can. Nothing sloppy. Again, waist up. Do not send me a picture that cuts off your shoulders or your arms, your hands. Waist up all the way, doesn't have a hat on, doesn't cut your hair off halfway. Nothing with corporate logos or words on it for the most part. Again, I can edit some of that out. Some of it's difficult too. Nothing that's been heavily edited. Like if you have a photo of yourself that's been heavily edited or cartoonized, I needed like a real picture of you, like an actual picture of you. Once it's done, so we've done the interview, I've edited it. And for me, just so you know, in terms of what I do in that process, I will take your video and try to clean up the brightness, the contrast, the colors and all that. I'll take my video and do the same thing. I'll take your audio and try to clean it up in an audio program. I'll take my audio, clean it up. I'll merge our audio and try to balance them. So if you're really loud and I happen to be softer, that it evens up a little bit so people don't feel like the interview is going, blast and then quiet, blast, quiet. Try to even them up a little bit. And then I'll take that final render of the audio, pair it up with our, merged videos, and then I'll render that. Now I've got an actual video with your good video, my good video, our good audio. I'll plug that into my template and start to go through it and just listen to it and, chop out parts that shouldn't stay. But once I'm done that and I've uploaded it to YouTube, rendered it, and rendering, if you're not used to that word, rendering can take a while. I try to do it a lot where I'll get a video ready for by the end of each night of a particular night. And then as I'm sleeping, I'll render it. So if it says, oh, this video will take 4 to 6 hours to render, well, if I'm sleeping, it doesn't really take up any of my time. So it'll render while I'm sleeping. The next morning, bam, your video is ready. I'll upload it to YouTube. YouTube typically takes about 1 to 2 hours to process it in high definition. And then I could, at that point, consider posting it live. I do the thumbnail picture with the title that we've worked with. I do write up a bunch of bullet points to kind of summarize what we talked about. I do ask you to take a look at that, to say, did I misquote you? Did I misrepresent you? Is there anything here that you would say needs to be edited or taken out? I want this to reflect you, especially, if you look back at this 6 months, a year from now, I want you to look back and think, yeah, this was me. This was my story. And this, maybe we could all do better. Tim could have done better as an interviewer. I could have done better as an interviewee. But, for what it was, we did a pretty decent job. And this did reflect my story. And I'm proud of what I did. I'm proud of what Tim did to polish it up, but I'm proud of what I did to, give him a good interview, a good photo. Tim did his part in this, and I'm proud of what the product was. In terms of once I'm done, I do post it on several Facebook pages, on Instagram and Twitter. I tag people if they're fine with that. Just work with me. Let me know if you're not fine with tagging because it's going to affect your job or something. Totally cool. I'll put it on my Facebook page and I will not tag you. Totally up to you. In terms of the actual day of the interview, if there's last minute changes, don't feel bad. If you say, Tim, I had an emergency. I've got a scheduling issue. I had a horrible night's sleep last night. Like I just feel like a zombie. I feel like I'm sick. I'm coughing too much. Or you're just not emotionally ready. Like let's say everything's fine. You're just like, I just feel like I'm out of sorts. Protect your emotional health in every way. You will not offend me whatsoever if you tell me, an hour before the interview or, the night before, Tim, it's just not a good time. Can we please reschedule? Do not feel any pressure for me. I will not put you on some kind of list and say, I'm not going to reschedule with them. Rescheduling is fine. Don't feel pressure. If we are scheduled and then at the last minute we move it out, we'll probably, because I'm already pre-scheduled with other people quite a bit, we'll probably move it out 2, 4, 6 weeks. That's totally fine. It gives you more time to think about it. It's a win-win. I get more subscribers, so when your interview does come out, more people are watching it. Most likely, you get more time to prepare for it. And I'm so busy with other stuff. If you say, "Hey Tim, I just can't do it today," and we were going to take the next 2 hours to do your interview, it's not like I've got nothing to do. Trust me. For those 2 hours, I've got 100 other things I'll plug in there, and I'll just keep working on other stuff. Do not feel like you're going to offend me. Do this when you are in the best physical and emotional spot for doing it. Or if you just need more time to prepare to, even if you're like, I feel fine, but I just want to think through this more. I need more time. I thought a month would be enough time. It's been a busy month, so I want to go through this. I want to practice once or twice. I didn't get a chance to do it yet. Totally fine. Once it's done, once we've actually done the interview and we've posted it, everything's worked out smoothly. It's now up on YouTube. I will check the comments on a regular basis, but I'd encourage you to check them as well. At least, maybe for the first couple of weeks, check daily for the first couple of days. Maybe after that, once it's been a month, maybe check every day or so. After that, check once a week, whatever. I will delete any comments that are hostile. If they're demeaning, if they're, Christians come in all the time and say, "Oh, you're an idiot, you're going to burn in hell." I delete those. If they're proselytizing, "Oh, you don't know the love of Jesus, I wish you'd come back to him." I'll delete them. I delete all that garbage if I see it. If I miss one, just let me know. I'll remove it. I want this to be a safe place for people to come and watch the videos and see the comments. But if you see something that you don't like, an ex-spouse comes on, whatever, ex-boyfriend comes on, makes a weird comment. If I don't catch it, you catch it, you let me know. I will protect the comment section, delete stuff, and keep people from commenting again like that. So, but also for you to check the comments if there's someone that just says, "Hey, this is really cool. I heard you live in whatever, Charlotte, North Carolina. I do too. I'd love to meet up. Here's my contact information." You might want to respond to them and say, "Hey, thanks so much. I'll reach out to you privately." If you feel like the first interview left a lot of things unsaid, or if you decide that you really have a lot more you'd like to share on a specific topic, maybe you'd say the first interview went well, but I would like to talk more about purity culture or recovering from religious trauma or end time stuff or whatever it is, or Christian nationalism. Just let me know and I'll keep you in mind for a follow-up interview. For a lot of you, that's definitely going to be the case. For some of you, it might not happen right away, but you might, keep following my channel, which I appreciate. And maybe a year or two from now, you say, "You know what, so-and-so, I happened to catch one of his other interviews, and so-and-so said something that I didn't mention in my interview, but that really made a big deal in my life. That was a big topic for me. I should have thought about it. I didn't, but here, let's do a follow-up. Let's talk about that particular topic." For a lot of people, if it's a follow-up interview, it will probably be further down the line because I've got a lot of people sitting saying, "Hey, can I jump in, please? I want to share my story for the first time." So if you say, "I want to do a follow-up interview," especially if you say like right away, it'll probably be a few months. But we'll definitely do it. If you don't hear from me, I get a lot of emails, dozens a day. If you don't hear from me, like we've agreed, yeah, let's do an interview in 6 months. You don't hear from me in 6 months, please reach out, remind me. It's not like I'm trying to, ignore anybody. In terms of your actual preparation for this, again, don't feel nervous. It's just you and me. It's not live. I can edit anything out that doesn't come out right. If you cough, you sniffle. Think of it like again, like a room or a bunch of us who are friends. It's very calm. It's very unintimidating. We're just friends sitting around telling our stories. Each person gets the floor, share their story in detail. No one's going to cut you off until you're done sharing. Please prepare yourself emotionally. Some people can be very matter of fact about these interviews, but I've had some interviews where it felt like it was both cathartic, but also somewhat triggering for the interviewee to share the details of their story. If you've been traumatized, know yourself, know that trauma is there. Brace yourself for the emotional upheaval of preparing for it and for sharing it through the interview. I've had people come and they've been surprised that they suddenly, like they've never seen me before apart from just on YouTube, but it feels very calming. It feels very open. And they suddenly just start crying. And sometimes they'll cry for 15 minutes. And it's like, it's just all coming out. And especially if you've never had a chance to share it like this before, you're like, oh my gosh, I've got so much to share. Please don't be ashamed or apologetic about your emotions or the tears that come up during the interview. I will be very respectful. And if we need to edit some things out, we will. But tears are not, something I necessarily would want to edit out. If it's you, it's your story, it's your journey. Your emotions are allowed to shine through this. There's power in telling it and telling it for real with you truly being yourself in all of your stories, glory and stain and all the little seasons you went through. People want to get to know the real you, and the sharing of your pain can be very cathartic, both for you and for them, especially if you've prepared your heart and your mind for the experience. Please do give yourself some downtime after the actual interview. Like if it's 3 hours that I've suggested and we take, 2.5 hours, then, that 30 minutes afterwards, I would recommend you give yourself that mental block to say, wow, I just shared a lot. I just poured out my heart. Some interviews can be very intense, and a little private decompression time by yourself may be very much in order. There's a few disqualifiers that I would mention. This won't apply to almost anybody, hopefully, that I interview, but just going to share them anyway, just in case. If you make snarky comments during the interview about people, if you start saying, so-and-so is just, just the stupidest person on the planet. They're a total, I've had people talk about other people who got pregnant out of wedlock, and they just say you're the stupidest idiot for not using birth control. Yes, I can edit that out, but it's part of what you shared. You start to sound like you're a snarky person. You sound like you're a bit of a obnoxious person to the people you've been involved with. I'll either end that interview or delete the comments, or I may finish the interview if I feel like maybe this will get better, but I may not publish the interview. And I do have interviews I have not published because there's significant issues in them. If you publicly attack people in a rude or obnoxious way, like if you go on Facebook and you are calling people names, and I've had issues with this in the past with some people that I've interviewed where they are very knowledgeable, but in public on Facebook and Instagram and so forth, they go around and just kind of poke fun at people, and they're like a verbal sniper. They're just trying to make people be put in the hot seat. They're trying to make people feel bad. They're trying to make people look like idiots. They use names. They come up with silly names that kind of like Donald Trump used to do, where they'd come up with all these names to kind of make you look like you're an idiot. If you do that in real life and I see it, I'm going to, not publish the interview and so forth. Or, if it's well after the fact that I observe it, I may leave the interview up, but I may just choose not to interview you again because I don't want to perpetuate that dynamic. If you're a flat earther, if you're a misogynist, if you're a climate change denier, if you support Donald Trump, I won't and you talk about it, I won't publish your interview. I'm not going to go down that route at all. If you don't like that, if you feel like that's cancel culture, that's your choice. You can call it what you want to, but I'm not going to publish anyone like that. If you see here, I have done interviews that I never published because they were unsalvageable. I will try to let you know if that's the case, but I'd obviously rather avoid that by hopefully me picking good candidates and me prepping candidates enough, and you being professional and interesting and the kind of person that people, when they look at your life, They say, um, this was a good person. I'm glad I spent this time listening to them. And when I look at their life, I look at their Facebook page, whatever, they're a quality person. It's not like they did a really cool interview, but then I find out they're a jerk. Anything like that. Anything weird. If you're not sure, just let me know. If you happen to be an anarchist, if you're a flat earther, any of these things, just let me know. If you happen to, when we look at the big picture of like, Tim, who are you trying to interview? I'm looking to interview people who have truly, they would say, I escaped and left Christianity. If you would say, I'm kind of still in it, I love Jesus, I just don't love the conservative stuff, but I love Jesus, that's not who I'm typically looking to interview. No offense to you, blessings on your journey and where you land, but I'm looking for people who would say Jesus is mythology. If that's not where you'd land, if you're just like, I really love Jesus. I love Jesus' Sermon on the Mount. I love, I think about being a follower of Jesus. Yes, he's not God. Yes, salvation isn't real, but Jesus is still kind of my hero. You're obviously going to see that come into my interviews sometimes with people. I'm looking for that to be like 2% of my interviews. I want people who would say, I fully believed it. I was on fire for the Lord. I wanted to turn the world upside down with the gospel. I wanted to spend my life sacrifice to bless the church, to reach out to the unreached, to make the Lord see that I was grateful for the salvation that he purchased. I was willing to spend my life in his service for his glory. I love the Lord. I love the Bible. And now I would say none of it was real. The Bible is an interesting book and I love learning about it, but it's all mythology. I don't need Jesus in any way. If there's any part of you that says, I need Jesus or I rely on Jesus, we're not a good fit for an interview. Hopefully that already is a given. But lastly, on that note, if you cough or sniffle nonstop, you're just not a good candidate. Understand that. I've had some people where they talk in a way where the coughing and the sniffling is just nonstop. I have a problem sometimes with coughing. I can take a drink of water and usually you can get through it. Sometimes we'll edit some of that stuff out. If it's like every 5 or 10 minutes, you're going to have a cough, we'll edit that out. That's fine. But if it's every 10 seconds, just know yourself. If people are going to listen to it and say, this is a garbage interview because the audio is awful. Every few seconds, I just hear or constantly. If that's what's going to happen on an interview, we're not going to do it. Obviously, please be honest with that stuff. But again, if there's also some things you can do where you'd say, I do have a coughing problem, but if I gargle this kind of whatever and I, practice and do this, I can get through it. I can do it. I just need times to step away and cough for a minute. But for 10, 15 minutes at a time, I can do it. That's fine. That's totally fine. I will work with people, absolutely who have issues. It's just the issues where it's nonstop, where you can't really edit that out. That's where I'm trying to avoid it. I should have mentioned this earlier, but I'll just mention it here. This isn't in the disqualifier section. I'm done with that. But your cell phone, make sure that it's turned off. I have had interviews where people said, "Oh, I can't turn it off. I need to have it available for this," and they kind of predicted it'll only go off 2 or 3 times in the interview, and it went off like 40, 50, 60 times. At some point, it's just going to be trash. The interview is going to be trash. It's not going to be publishable. And I have had at least one interview like that, and it broke my heart because it was a good interview, but they would not put their phone on silent, and they insisted it would stop soon, and it didn't stop soon. It was probably well over 100 times. It just kept going ping, ping, ping. Keep that in mind. The last thing I'll say for this one, there is a list of topics that I mention in each interview. Like when you go to my videos, you'll see the video, but then beneath it is a description, and it's usually shrunk down, but you can click more and it pops open. If you could read through that for as many of the interviews as you want to, but read through some of the descriptions, because some of the topics are going to be listed there where you will not have thought about it on your own, but once you read it from someone else, you'll think, that was a part of my journey too. I'm not sure why I didn't think about that, but that was a big deal. Maybe, for example, the topic of tithing. You're like, tithing was such a big deal in my life at one point, but Now I don't even think about it. It's been, 5, 10 years since I even thought about such a thing. But that's, if I'm going to tell my story, I need to talk about it. Fear of demons, fear of hell, of course, things like God watching you and seeing your thoughts, modesty culture, shame culture, virginity culture, of course, speaking in tongues, missions, the devil trying to stop you, trying to get you to sin versus God testing your faith, um, going to heaven, trying to earn a crown, being a good and faithful servant, perfectionism as a Christian, why do bad things happen to good people, dealing with that with God, prayer, confession of sins, feeling like you let God down constantly or you betrayed God, things with church worship, family worship, private worship, end times, rapture, tribulation, mark of the beast, Y2K, end of the world, fearing God's discipline, worrying about losing God's blessing or his best, peer pressure at church and youth group and revival conferences, things like that, being encouraged not to seek secular counseling or depression medicines, miracles, dreams and visions, hearing God speak, your guardian angel, apologetics, the gift of singleness versus and celibacy, your church, your youth group experiences, worship, whether you are participating or leading or both, your post conversion, things like learning to trust yourself, sexual healing and embracing eroticism, comparative mythology, Asherah, Sumerian and Egyptian mythologies, Greco-Roman mythologies, the Homeric epics, Enoch. There's just so many topics. And, this list goes on. I'm going to work on a Google document that's not going to be available at the time of posting this video, but I'm working on a Google document. I'll eventually have it. So check back in a few weeks, but it's going to list some of these topics I just mentioned and a lot more. But, come up with some way to make sure that you have been thorough. One of the hardest parts about this is there are so many nuances and so many parts to our journey in and out of Christianity that often if we're just trying to move past it, we tend to kind of forget about it, some of the details. And often too, depending on the way that you tell the story, you can focus on different aspects of it. I told, for example, I've told my story on my channel, but I got interviewed a while ago on Ichabod with Brady Goodwin, and I told a completely different part of my story that I'd never mentioned before on my channel or anywhere. But people who didn't know my story were like, huh, or they knew my story, but they were like, oh, this is a whole new part of it. It's hard in 2 hours to cover everything, but assuming that this is the first interview you do and the last one you do for a while, we want to still cover as much as we can that really gives you the feeling that you got to share your full story. You had the floor, you used it, you really got to do fair justice to your journey. You don't want to get to the end of it and think I left out so much. Now, if you do feel like that, just because even though you did share all your parts that you did today in your interview, but you just feel like there's just so much more, that's a good chance for a follow-up interview. But if it's just an issue where we didn't plan it out right, you didn't do your bullet points, so forth, that's just an issue of preparation. And so I would recommend that you do look through some lists, the Google document when I have it linked, but go through for now my other interviews, look at some of the bullet points that other people have brought up. That will help you to make sure you're thorough. In terms of wrapping up here, again, I want this to be a great experience. I want you to feel like it's safe. I want you to feel like it's low key, no pressure. You just get a chance to talk amongst friends, be yourself, share the whole story. I want this to be something you're proud of when we're done. You just feel like, wow, this was a great experience. Tim has, worked hard at his piece of this. He helped me to prepare for my piece of this. And I'm pretty proud of what we came up with at the end. If there's any parts of it that you don't feel comfortable with, my write-ups, my title, my thumbnail, please let me know. I'll work together with you. I do not want anyone to look at this and say, I'm not proud of what we did. I would rather keep that video private until we iron out any issues. I do not want anyone to look back and think, I wish I hadn't done that. This is definitely a place where you get to shine. I will help you shine. I'll try to shine myself if I can. I'll help you to shine as much as I can, and we'll end up with something we're both proud of. When it's all said and done, you're part in it too, long-term. Again, if you could keep it on the comments, check in from time to time. If there's something where somebody's truly reached out to you in the comments, but it's been a while since you would have probably had a reason to check it, I might reach out to you and say, hey, so-and-so put a comment on, they're looking to reach out to you. Do you mind, going to YouTube when you get a chance and, interact with them? I would ask you if you feel comfortable with to share it. Of course, again, I'll tag you on Facebook if you want me to. I do tag most people. I would say 95% of people get tagged. A few people have reasons they don't want to be tagged, and that's fine. But if you can be tagged and or you can share it in any way, the more that it gets dispersed amongst people, the better it is for me, for my channel, for the monetization. The more views, the more subscribers I have, the more I can do hopefully bigger and bigger things with this. So do your part, whatever you feel comfortable with. For those of you that have to keep it on the lowdown, totally makes sense. No problem at all. I don't check and see who's sharing it and how much are you doing to promote your interview. I assume that people are doing that. And if they don't, they've got their reasons. I'm not checking up on people in any way on that level. I just ask that you do it if you can. It helps me so much. And that's pretty much it. I know again, I'm sure I'm going to end this and think, darn it, I forgot to share something, but that's always the way it is. You know how how that works. But I hope this gives some of you who are thinking of doing an interview with me some kind of background and sense of what we're going to do, what you need to think through to be prepared for this. Again, I'll work with you on almost any issue, but I do ask you to come up to the plate, professionally, in every way that you can, and then we'll just take it from there. It's kind of like we know there's always going to be an issue. So at some point, the audio is going to flicker, the video is going to flicker. Something's going to happen. We're going to have a cough. We can't edit out. There's going to be some hiccups in this video. There's no way around it. I'll make a mistake. I'm processing it. Something's going to be messed up. But the more that we can both think through these issues and come to the table trying to eliminate the stupid issues, so to speak, the stupid mistakes, the more that they're out of the equation, the better chance we've got for the final actual interview that's published to look polished up. So just do your best. Any questions, feel free to let me know. I certainly will meet with you in advance if we need to. I can't meet with everybody. If I did that, I wouldn't get my work done. But if you need to, if you're like, look, I watched your video for preparation, but I have still have some questions. Yeah, I'd rather not email them. I want to just talk to you first. Or I want to do a quick 5-minute test of my Zoom and I can't do it with anybody else for whatever reason. I need to test it with you to make sure it works. We'll find a time. We'll connect for 5 or 10 minutes, make sure your stuff's working and go from there. But please take everything that I've said here seriously. All these issues, every one of them, from how your camera is, the angle of it, the lighting, even your clothes, the clothes that you pick, not just things like not having big logos and words on them, but even just the clothes you pick with the background. Try to pick things that are going to be easy to edit with, things are going to work well. And actually, I will add one other thing. I should have had this in my notes. I've talked about it with people, but in terms of the video, if you can, I need depth of field. And some of you know what I'm talking about, but I'll just explain it. What I have is a green screen, as I think everybody knows that. So there's a green sheet behind me that I hang up and take it down when I'm done the video. But I work with Zoom and I have a picture that I put up, and so it interprets the green as that. But what you feel like you're seeing is a depth. You feel like you're seeing me close up in a sharper way, and you see it as it goes further and further towards the back of the bookstore. It looks like it's a little bit more fuzzy. There's that depth. If you could pick somewhere for your setting, if at all possible, where there's depth. So, for example, if you're going to sit in a sofa and there's a wall 3 inches behind the sofa or 1 inch behind the sofa, there's no depth to it, right? It's you and there's a wall. If you can set it up in a way, even temporarily, where it's, the camera is focused on you, you're sitting on your sofa, and behind you is 10, 20, 30 feet of open space, then the camera is going to focus on you and it's going to blur what's behind you. Depth of field is always preferable. The bokehs, I want that if we can get it. So I should have had that earlier in a different section, but I'm going to add it here since I was thinking about it. But again, going back to the finale, I want you to shine. I want to do my best. I'll do my part. You do your part. We'll have a great interview. Let me know what questions you have. This has been longer than I thought, but I hope some of this has been helpful as you think through it. And I just end by saying I appreciate your willingness to do it. Even if you're just considering it, you're not sure yet, you're just watching this to see what I do behind the curtain, but you're like, I might do one. Let's think about it. Totally cool. Even if it's 6 or 12 months from now, keep me in mind. I love to do interviews. I love to hear people's stories. I love to help people kind of develop their platforms, even on a very small level at first. It's a privilege and an honor to work with you. I take it very seriously. I treat it as a job, not a hobby. I take this as very much as a business that I need to take seriously. And I want to get better at it over time. And I want to, help you to do your best to put forth your best foot when it's your turn to share your story. Let me know. Let me know what I can do to make it a better experience, either in the comments here or more likely personally when we talk for your interview. Let me know. I want to help this be a good experience for you, both in terms of preparation, as well as the actual interview, as well as the post-processing and the publishing it, letting people know it's there. That's it. That's the news from Lake Wobegon. If there's any questions, again, let me know. But thank you all so much. Great to work with you all. This community is awesome. And the fact that so many people are willing to speak up and share their story with power, it's awesome. We're going to change the world one interview at a time. So thank you all so much. Have a great day.